Hey guys, it's Anthony. By now, just about everyone has commented on that shocking confrontation between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House. It's rare to see such an intense public clash between world leaders, let alone one that results in one of the head of states being thrown out of the White House. This bizarre incident has already inspired a wave of memes that continue to flood the internet even today, making people laugh despite the seriousness of the situation. Humor, of course, is a powerful tool. It helps people relax. It sometimes even brings people together. In many ways, Trump and Zelensky's confrontation felt like a dark comedy show, but it also marked a turning point. Trump, the leader of the world's most powerful country, went from being a quiet skeptic of Zelensky and Ukraine to an outright critic. He is now openly questioning Ukraine in ways that align more with Russian perspectives than with the mainstream Western narrative. And that in itself is both ironic and amusing because Trump is now exposing firsthand many of the things that the Western establishment had long dismissed as Russian propaganda. Things like corruption in Ukraine, the West's sponsorship of right-wing Nazi radicals, and the failure of the so-called democratic liberal order. Suddenly, everything the media claimed about the West being a flourishing garden of democracy is falling apart, and Trump is making it clear that he wants out of this swamp. He doesn't care about alliances, he doesn't care about Ukraine, and frankly, he doesn't even care about Russia either.
Trump's stay in court comes after his comments about NATO this weekend.
You got to pay. You got to pay your bills.
Trump saying he would encourage Russia to attack NATO countries that do not spend enough money on military defense.
One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want.
For him, this is a business deal. And in this business deal between Ukraine and Russia, Trump sees Russia as a more valuable partner, a country that can offer more in terms of trade and geopolitical leverage. If you think about it logically, what does Ukraine bring to the table for America? And what does Russia offer? From a purely economic standpoint, the answer is quite obvious. And Trump understands this. He knows that in order to weaken China, he needs to pull Russia away from Beijing. Trump is prepared to sell off Ukraine as part of a larger negotiation with Russia, and there's no doubt he'll follow through on that. For one, Trump has already done way too much damage to Ukraine's reputation in Western media for him to now backtrack. Reversing his stance would only destroy his credibility. And beyond that, Trump and Zelensky clearly can't stand each other. Their meetings are always tense. They don't even speak the same political language. Trump talks about hard deals and negotiations, money, while Zelensky keeps pushing for his usual emotional appeals. And that dynamic doesn't work well with Trump. And even worse, Zelensky challenged Trump on his own turf. And that's a huge mistake. For Trump, losing face in front of his own people is unacceptable. And that's why he threw Zelensky out of the White House. He wanted to show that he's a strong leader who doesn't put up with this, and he just kicked him out. Trump has also been signaling for months that Ukraine is no longer a priority for the U.S. And why is it that the U.S. did a 180-degree turn against Ukraine? Why this flip-flop? And there are a few reasons, but one is that the world's facing a structural crisis and neoliberal globalism has reached a lifespan. The unipolar world order where the U.S. dominated the world has become a failure. The idea that a single global power can dominate the entire world, police the entire world, just doesn't work. And for decades, the biggest threat to the US-led world order was Russia. And not because of ideology, but because Russia is the only civilization capable of resisting Western control. It has nuclear weapons, it has a vast landmass, and it has the ability to lead a global movement against Western dominance. The goal of Western elites has always been to force Russia into submission and to make it part of their globalized order. But Trump doesn't believe in that vision. Unlike Biden, he doesn't want to pour America's resources into propping up a globalist utopia that only benefits multinational corporations. That's why he shut down projects like the Paris Climate Agreement. That's why he's weakening NATO. He sees these institutions as unnecessary burdens on the U.S. economy. Instead, Trump is trying to reshape the world in a multipolar system where there are multiple centers of power, and the U.S. plays the strongest hand in this multipolar world system. In this new world order, who is America's real rival? It's not Russia. Russia is of course, a huge empire, a big country with a lot of influence in the world. However, Russia doesn't pose an existential economic threat to the US. As for nuclear weapons, they're just a deterrent. They don't affect America's economic dominance. For the US government, the real threat is China. China's economic influence is reshaping the global balance of power. And when combined with Russia, it forms an unstoppable counterweight to US dominance. Trump knows this, and so do people running this country. That's why Trump is willing to let Ukraine and Eastern Europe go, because he wants to pull Russia away from China. He's expressed this so many times, it's quite obvious now.
With China, because I think you talked about before the desire to box out China from that part of the world and have a closer relationship with Russia.
So as a student of history, which I am, and I've watched it all, the first thing you learn is you don't want Russia and China to get together. With that being said, no, it's not a big part of it, but maybe that'll happen or maybe it won't.
He's already started this process without even negotiating directly. He's shaken up Western unity, he's divided NATO, he's vilified Zelensky and called for him to be removed. This doesn't mean that Trump's just going to hand everything over to Russia. Trump's still going to try to play hardball and try to seem more nuanced. So where does this leave Russia? Would Putin consider allying with Trump against China? The answer is quite clear. It's absolutely not, because history has shown time and time again that nothing is more dangerous than trusting the words of an American president or trusting the American government. That brings me to the whole point of this video. Zelensky's biggest mistake, the one that history won't forget, is trusting that the United States would stand by him until the end. And honestly, it's not that surprising that things turned out the way they did, because if you look at history, this is exactly what the US does. It's what our government has done over and over again. We lift up leaders, we prop up governments, we give them weapons, we aid them, we promise them that we will support them. And when they're no longer useful to us, we drop them dead. You don't have to go far back to see this pattern. We did it in Vietnam. We backed the South Vietnamese government for years. We sent over 500,000 American troops, and then we just left. The fall of Saigon was chaotic and heartbreaking, and it happened just because the US walked away. Then Iraq, we invaded, we occupied, we claimed we were spreading democracy, but when it got too costly for us and too complicated, we pulled out. And what followed was chaos, terrorism, and the rise of extremist groups. Libya, the same thing. We helped topple Gaddafi, and then we stepped back and let the country crumble into warlordism and open-air slave markets. And don't forget Afghanistan. 20 years of thousands of lives lost. And in the end, the Taliban took over faster than anyone expected. People were literally falling off US planes trying to escape. And now it appears it's Ukraine's turn. At the beginning of this war, the US was all in. The White House couldn't get enough of Zelensky. He was called a hero. He was called the Churchill of our time. There were speeches, flags, standing ovations, billions of dollars in military aid. Zelensky was on magazine covers. He visited Washington, D.C. and got a ton of attention. But all of this was conditional. All of that praise, it was only because he was useful. He was useful for fighting Russia, useful for defending the West's narrative, useful for fueling the arms industry and keeping the money flowing. Now that things have started to shift, now that the war isn't going the way Washington wanted, they're turning against him. We've already seen how quickly the tone has changed. And just a few months ago, Zelensky was being embraced by the White House. Now officials are blaming him directly for this. And Trump is already positioning himself to walk away from Ukraine completely. He's out there saying he's going to cut a deal, not by helping Ukraine win, but by cutting a deal with Russia. And here's the brutal truth everyone needs to hear. Ukraine has been used and discarded. It's been turned into a pawn in a geopolitical chess game between the West and Russia. The people of Ukraine, millions of them, have been caught in the middle of a game they never asked to be part of. Their cities have been decimated, ruined, their population scattered, their economy in ruins. And for what? For a war they were never going to win anyways. What's even more frustrating is that this whole war could have been avoided. Let's not pretend it came out of nowhere. The US and NATO spent years poking the bear, years pushing NATO eastwards, promising Ukraine NATO membership, encouraging anti-Russian sentiment in Ukraine. Was Putin wrong for invading Ukraine? Absolutely, of course, but we can't also ignore how the West set the stage for this conflict. You don't just build a military alliance right up someone's border and expect no reaction. You don't interfere in another country's neighborhood and expect peace. So when Trump now says he wants to end the war and position himself on the side of peace, he's conveniently forgetting how we got here. This isn't some kind of fire that suddenly started burning. It was lit up by the same people now pretending that they want to put it out. And sure, Trump wasn't in office when all of this began, but if he's going to be honest, he should admit that the U.S. foreign policy was responsible for all of this. Russia, meanwhile, has learned its lesson, and there are no illusions left about the West. As Otto von Bismarck once said, "Do not expect that once taking advantage of Russia's weakness, you will receive dividends forever. Russia has always come for their money, and when they come, do not rely on an agreement signed by you are supposed to justify. They are not worth the paper it is written. Therefore, with the Russian, it is to play fair or do not play." So here's what's going on now. It looks like Russia is moving toward making peace with the U.S., or at least opening the door to it. And not because they've suddenly become best friends with America, but because it makes sense right now. There's some talk going around about some sort of economic deal based on what you can hear from guys like Steve Witkoff and Marco Rubio. It seems like something is already happening behind the scenes. And make no mistake, Russia and China know what's happening. They aren't naive. They may cut a deal with the U.S., but they have not forgotten the past, not by a long shot. They know that the U.S. at any moment can turn on its partners, just like they have with Vietnam, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan. And that's why I don't think Russia is going to abandon China. Not even close. It's not just about ideology or politics. It's about survival. Russia and China have built something together that goes beyond just a temporary convenience. They've been deepening ties, whether economically or diplomatically or even militarily. And while Russia might be flirting with the idea of building relations with the U.S., they're not going to just throw China under the bus. They're not going to throw away one ally, the one ally that stood by them the entire time the Western world tried to cut them off. People in the West have this mindset, Western mindset. They don't understand the Eastern mindset. In the East, your word is your bond. If you say something, if you build a relationship with someone, betrayal is the worst thing you could do. Here in the West, in America, betrayal is part of everyday life, unfortunately. People don't like to talk about this, especially in the media where it's all slogans and emotional appeals. But the truth is, the cold hard truth is that the Western actors, Western governments and corporations, NGOs, have done more harm to Ukraine than anybody has ever done. They sold Ukraine this pipe dream full of promises. They used them as a pawn in their own geopolitical chess game against Russia. And now that the tides of the war have changed, they're quietly slipping out the back door. And what's left is a devastated country with millions displaced and a generation with no clear future. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I know it's a bit depressing, but if you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. If you have anything to say, leave your comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.